This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of October 6, 2014. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if when you're watching this video you see anything that you might want to use, check out the description where I'll place links to each one of them. So I'm going to start at the top here with 25 retro style borders. The files included in Illustrator and EPS format, and there's 5 different files for each of those, but many of those are different color variations, so I have this one and this one open, which covers the whole set. So this is called retro borders, but to me these look much more vintage. When I think retro, I tend to think 1940s or 50s, and these look much older than that to me, but they're still really cool. So if I zoom in here, you can tell that the actual line work on these is handled expertly well. If I zoom in very close, it's very clean work throughout, so that's always a big plus when you're working with these. And there's a nice variation of different elements to pick from, so I'm going to scroll through these quickly so you can see what we have to work with. It transitions from very simple elements like this one right here to much more intricate scroll work if I zoom in on these. And once again, pay attention to those curves. These are handled very nicely. And on this page, we have some more elements to choose from, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I think these would work really nice for business cards or page borders, things like that where you want to set different elements apart with these pretty unique elements. So there's a nice selection of things to choose from here. If I zoom out, you can select an item and change the fill color very easily to whatever you want to use. So do keep that in mind when you're working with these. And there is a background included as well. So if I drag this off on its own, you can tell that you also have this kind of antique paper looking background to work with in case that's something you might find useful. So 25 different elements to choose from in vector form, and if that's something you think you might have use for, definitely check this pack out. Next up is 20 abstract triangular backgrounds. This set has 20 different backgrounds in PNG format. I picked my favorite 5 to show here, but you can definitely explore around this pack when you download it and see what else you might find interesting. And these are really big for the most part. If I go to image and then image size, this particular one is 5,000 by 5,000 pixels. So that's really large for almost any project you want to use, but there are a few different size formats, so definitely check that out when you're using this. So this one's called Phoenix. I really enjoy the color choices here. It kind of reminds me of a fire, which would be fitting for a phoenix. And if you like the color choices in any of these and you want to pull those particular colors and use them on different projects, just hit I on your keyboard for the eyedropper tool. You can go ahead and select the color and copy and paste this hex code right here to use in different projects. It's really a nice way to think about different color choices you can use in different designs while looking at these backgrounds. This one's called Wine, a really nice pink to purple fade, definitely evocative of a red wine. This one's called Sunny. It's really nice and bright, and I think the color choices on this one, once again, are very strong. A lot of really nice subtle gradations between these really light yellows to these almost browns and oranges in this particular background. This one's called Whirl, and I've actually never seen a polygonal background quite like this one. It's a really interesting concept. A lot of great color choices in this one, and I really like the sense of movement that's going on. Once again, this is very unique. I've looked at quite a few different polygonal backgrounds in the past, and this is the first time I've seen something that conveys movement quite like this one does. And the last of the 5 here is called Glass. I think this has a really neat, almost underwater vibe to it. The color choices, once again, very interesting. Now, I definitely recommend checking all 20 of these for different color variations, as well as different layouts like this Whirl one right here, not only for the backgrounds themselves, but for the colors used inside. Next up is 10 watercolor brush strokes. The file includes Illustrator as well as JPEGs, but the JPEGs will be of limited use as they have these backgrounds in them, so it'll be a little bit difficult to pull just these particular brush strokes off. And these aren't Illustrator brushes, they are these actual individual brush elements like this right here, so do keep that in mind when you're using these. And you can pull off this background and use just the background on its own if that's something you're interested in doing, so keep that in mind when using this particular file. I'm actually going to delete these backgrounds, so these particular brush strokes are a little bit easier to see. So looking at the first 3 right here, these do have a very cool texture to them. It's handled really well. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so that you can see that the transitions between all the different colors are very nice and smooth. It's pretty hard to do something like this in Illustrator, so these are pulled off particularly well. Although something to note, I noticed that this file is slowing down my computer noticeably when I have all these 9 brushes open in the same file. They're normally presented with just 3 on a page, so I'd probably try to keep the amount of these used on a particular project limited, as it will start to really take a toll on your computer as it's processing a whole lot of points for all these different subtle gradations. But the actual brush strokes themselves look really good, and the color transitions, like in particular on this one, look really solid. This is one of the best interpretations of watercolor I've seen in vector. So here's the next set of 4 right here. These are a little bit more simple in their color variations, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's some nice different strokes to work with here that you can apply over designs or even bring into Photoshop if you want to use them that way. Inside Photoshop, these will affect performance a whole lot less. And here's the last set of 3. Once again, these color transitions are really well handled. As I said before, I think it's some of the best watercolor effects that I've personally seen inside Illustrator. These look really good. So definitely a really solid pack. Do keep in mind once again that these will noticeably slow down your computer if you have too many of them on the screen at one time. So do try to limit your use of these if you're on a slower computer. But as I said before, these are some of the best watercolor transitions I've seen inside Illustrator. So I definitely recommend that you pick this one up and see if you have some use for them. And these bottom 3 free goods are free on Facebook. To get them, just hit this free on Facebook button and like Creative Market, and then the download link will appear. It's super fast and easy to do. So I'm going to start on the left here with vector flowers. The included file formats are EPS, JPEG, and PNG, so I have the EPS files open in Illustrator here to show these. And there's a huge selection of flowers to pick from, and they're all super fun, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit and take a closer look at these. They have a very unique hand-drawn style, and all the color choices are really superb, so do keep that in mind when you're using these, that these are a really great inspiration for a very vintage flower color palette. So I'm going to go through these 4 different panels of these particular flowers, and then there's a whole bunch more included in this particular pack. There's actually patterns as well as pre-made compositions of these flowers to pick from, but I think if you enjoy using different types of elements and combining them and making unique arrangements, this flower pack is great. Like some of the other flower packs I've shown in the past, this one in particular does have an absolutely huge assortment of flowers to pick from, so that's a really big plus if you're trying to make something unique and custom. So here's one of the pre-made compositions, definitely a very cool layout, and it's a great place to put some text in the middle here. Here's another great pre-made composition. In the center here you could put text or an image. I think either would work pretty well. And here's yet another pre-made composition. I definitely think some hand-drawn type in the center here would look really great. And here's a repeating floral pattern. I think many of the repeating patterns in this pack would work really great on greeting cards or papers, things like that, if you want to print out some really unique and fun flower arrangements. Here's another repeating pattern. Really fun color choices in this one. Another repeating pattern. Once again, I think this would work really great on the back of a card or something similar to that. These have a really fun feel to them, so I think they'd work really well in that particular situation. And here's a very similar repeating pattern with a little bit different color choice. And here are a couple more pre-made compositions to choose from. So this is definitely a really strong collection of not only flowers, but color variations as well. So if you think you'll have use for this pack and you enjoy making custom arrangements, mixing and matching different elements, this pack is definitely something I'd recommend checking out. Next up is 16 Retrograde Actions. You will need Photoshop to use these actions, and there are 16 different actions included, and I've went ahead and ran them all already, and then I stuck them inside these folders. The action doesn't place them in folders by default, but it's pretty easy to do so. So I'm going to go through these 16 different actions and just show you how they look applied to this particular photo. And do keep in mind that actions will look differently on different photos, so definitely play around with what action you're using on what photo to see the different results that it may produce. So this one's called Lower. It does a slightly purplish overlay on the photo. This one's called Vintage. That gives it the warm look that older cameras tend to give photos. This one's called Black and White, pretty self-explanatory. This one's called Fin. It really does a nice job of punching up the overall contrast of the photo. I actually quite like this action. This one's called Fool, which is a light purple overlay. This one's Lullabies, and I actually really like this effect. This one gives that kind of warm, vintagey feel that the previous one did, called Vintage, but I actually like this one quite a bit more. It just seems to have a little bit more life to it. This one's called Kinda, another color overlay for the most part. This one's called Rebellion. I actually really like what this is doing to this wall over here. Kind of a neat difference in the overall coloration of this particular photograph, so this one's definitely interesting. This one's called Ophelia, a blue overlay. This one's called Deeper. Once again, that warm, slightly vintage feel, quite like this one. This action's called Feel. It's a greenish, bluish overlay, almost underwater feeling to me. This action's called Bella. It brightens everything up. Once again, that warm, vintage feel to it. This one's called Daft, a slight yellow overlay. This action's called Cherry with a reddish, slightly purplish overlay to it. This action's called Pink, and it gives it a pinkish purplish overlay. And this action's called Sweet, which just gives it a washed out vintagey feel. So 16 different actions included in this set, and I quite like some of them, like this one Lullabies in particular. I think it does a great job. I did get some warnings while running these, like the command set is not currently available, but that didn't actually seem to prevent the action from running, so hopefully it's not an issue for you. So if you think any of these actions look like something you might have use for, definitely check this action set out. And last we have Vanity Numbers. This file is included in Adobe Illustrator format and it's pretty straightforward. There's 3 different sets of numbers here in slightly different variations, and they're all based on old license plates. So I'll zoom in on these so we can take a closer look. The letters look really good. These letters have a nice distressed nature to them while maintaining really easy readability, and it's worth noting that this is not a font. These are individual elements, so I can go ahead and rearrange these or reposition these however I see fit, so it's really quick and easy to do that, but do keep in mind this isn't a font that you can just type out. So here's the second row here. These are a little bit thicker. All the line work looks pretty consistent throughout these. There's no strange jagged lines I have to worry about. And this bottom set here is the thinnest, and I think it's my favorite of the bunch. The line work definitely looks really good, and the letters are all nice and legible. So hopefully this will be pretty useful if you need some custom letters for your project, and this particular style suits your needs. And of course, you can always mix and match the different weights too, if you want to vary this up a little bit more and make it a little bit more interesting. So there's 3 different letter styles to choose from, and if you think you'll have use for these, definitely check this one out. So that's it for this week's free goods, and remember they are free this week only, so if any of them look like something you might want to use, check out the description of this video where I'll place links to each one of them. If you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. I do this video every Monday to let you know what's new and free at Creative Market. Thanks for watching.